Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're just about to get started, so we'll give a few moments for everyone to join. Everyone, and welcome to today's. So today we are joined by our lovely panelists here that you can see on the screen, and our host, Jameson, who will be taking you through today's question and answer session, which is great. Before we get started, I just want to quickly go through some housekeeping for you. So throughout today's session, we would like it to be as interactive as possible. So that means that you, our wonderful audience, get the opportunity to ask lots of questions. So some of you would have received an email communication from us yesterday. One of our lovely panelists here would have gotten in touch with you, asking you what you would like to hear about from us. So today, we're going to be covering some of those topics. But if there is something that you'd like to ask us or ask one of our panelists, please do get in touch using the question and answer box, which is at the bottom of your screen. It's marked as Q&A, and you'll be able to click on there and ask a question directly to our panelists. In addition, if you are joining us from LinkedIn Live today, you may use the comments box, which will appear on the right-hand side or the left-hand side, depending on what screen you're using. And we will be monitoring that as well, so that we'll be answering your questions from there live. Great stuff. So without further ado, I introduce you to your host for this wonderful event, Jameson. Over to you.
Thanks, Steph. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you joining today. I hope you take to heart Steph's guidance to ask questions. I've got some surprise questions for the panelists that they don't know about. So I will say that no question is off limits. If somebody says something today that piques your interest and you want to learn a little bit more about it, ask the question for sure. So today, let me share my screen briefly. We're not going to live in slides. It's truly a Q&A type session, but the topic today is a cross-platform approach to mitigating finance risk. And if you're on this webinar, this obviously is a topic that you care about and that matters to you and how you function in your daily work. And I think we've all been part of projects that are focused on risk mitigation, specifically within ERP, JD Edwards, processes like accounts payable automation, mitigating risk in terms of segregation of duties and access controls. And the one thing that's true about these types of projects is they are very, very boring and tedious if you're not doing them with friends and coworkers and teammates that make them more interesting. So as we were prepping for today's session, that's what stood out to me. The panelists, we all get along really, really well. We all happen to work together professionally to support ACO, who you're going to hear a lot from today with Steve and Lucy. But it's fun. It makes the topic much more fun and much more engaging to do this as a team. So that's my hope for you is after today, if you leave with some nuggets of wisdom or new thoughts that you'd never really, new topics that you never really broached before, take it back to your organization and figure out how to make it a team sport, because it will be a lot more interesting and beneficial to you if you do that. So just to start out, my background is in AP. I lead the enterprise accounts team here at Medius, which is an accounts payable automation company. But my first job out of school was as a travel and expense manager and an AP specialist. And within a month of being in that role, after putting in some rigor and processes in terms of how travel got booked at that company and how expense reports got submitted, I uncovered a massive instance of fraud. And the only reason that that happened is because of controls that got put in place. Specifically, I'll just touch briefly on what it was, so it's not so ambiguous. We had an employee who was driving his personal car everywhere. So even if it was a trip from Alabama, where I'm from, to Texas, he would drive his personal car and rack up the mileage. And I noticed inflated mileage in general, not just his specifically, but I just put in a basic calculator that Enterprise Rental Car puts out there that lets you compare cost of driving a personal car to rental car cost. And if anybody submitted personal mileage, I made them attach a screenshot of that calculator indicating that it was at least somewhat close to break even, if not more advantageous to drive the personal car. And he refused to do it. And I found out that this employee had been paying his mortgage through mileage reimbursement. So the point is, fraud is tough to track by nature, and it's getting much, much more difficult to track because of AI and because of the use of new artificial intelligence by fraudulent actors out there, some of which aren't even human. 40, just to frame this up, 44% of businesses have been targeted by invoice fraud specifically. We surveyed over 2,000 financial professionals, and on average, they have been targeted 13 times in last year alone. And 9 have seen successful, on average, 9 successful fraud attempts. To make the matter worse, and today's not all about invoice fraud, but I do think it is the epitome of, if you don't have proper controls in place, what can happen to the organization. 53% of finance professionals have been targeted. I'm sure many on this line have been targeted by deep fakes, with 43% ultimately falling victim to deep fakes. And when asked if your CEO called you and asked you to transfer money, and it sounded like the CEO, and they were using terms that the CEO would use for your organization, 87% admitted that they would likely make a payment to that CEO. So it's getting much more difficult to control these things. And just related to internal fraud specifically, we found that 56% of people who learn about internal fraud in their organization choose to stay silent because it's so difficult to be trusted with that kind of knowledge that you might uncover. And it just becomes easier to stay silent. And all of that's tied to fear of recrimination. So not an easy topic. We want to help today make it a little bit easier to distill down what you can do at your organization and how you can partner with our organizations to make it easier. We asked, and Steph alluded to this, we asked via email about 50 registrants what they cared about today, what they hoped to hear. And this answer really stood out to me. There are 2 ways for mitigating risk. One is financial analysis. The other is user and application security. And we're going to be nerding out on both of these topics today deeply, probably more than you've ever heard in a single hour about mitigating risk through these 2 avenues. But it's likely you're coming from either IT, where you care about user and application security, or finance, where you care about mitigating risk and fraud through financial analysis and controls. So again, to the point of working as a team, these things aren't successfully mitigated unless you work across IT and finance. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists today, have them introduce themselves. We're going to go in this order. But Lucy, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about you and your role. Tell us a little bit about ACO as well. And then the surprise question, I want to hear your favorite guilty pleasure movie.
Uh-oh. I don't know. I have too many favorite movies.
Okay, you can pick one.
So, hi, everyone. My name is Lucy Danielian. I'm the Director of Accounts Payable here at ACO. I've been here for about 14 years. Primary focus has always been on implementations, process improvement, et cetera, efficiency, boosting measures. We are the largest mechanical contractor on the West Coast. We have a whole bunch of different divisions, electrical, plumbing, and we generally grow by acquiring companies in other geographic areas. So we've been growing that way, and we're continuing to grow. That's pretty much it in terms of a guilty pleasure. I really like this movie that they always show. shoot, I forget, at Christmas time. Love Actually.
Love
Probably one of
Actually.
my most favorite
That's a good
movies.
one.
Great movie.
It's like most happy movie. There's a lot more, but I think that one that's the one that comes to mind as a happy movie that I could
That's a good
rewatch and
one.
rewatch.
You don't have to feel too guilty about that one.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Lucy. Glad to have you here. Steve, you don't mind.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Steve Pardee. I lead the finance and back office systems at ACO and for IT. That includes, everything JD Edwards, and I've been at ACO for about 4 years, a little more than 4 years or so. In a previous life, I was a CPA. It's been a long time since I've been a practicing CPA, but I've got sort of a keen interest in controls and risk mitigation and that sort of thing. I've implemented JD Edwards and All Out at several places in my career, and we're kind of working through some new initiatives related to controls and All Out. And so we'll talk about some of those things a little bit later on, but I'm kind of keenly interested in this topic myself.
Thanks, Steve. I didn't realize you were a CPA. That is certainly a good background for somebody in IT to have as well.
Believe it or not, I didn't even know that. This is the first time I'm hearing about it.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I can't swear to be the best CPA anymore, but it's good to have the background.
Yeah, indeed. Awesome. All right, Linda, if you don't mind.
I'm Linda Nelson.
We
What?
didn't hear Steve. We didn't hear Steve's guilty pleasure movie.
Oh, yeah, you don't get off the hook on that one.
All right, fine. I will throw out, just the first thing that came to mind was Beetlejuice, and I don't know why that is, but I just love like silly movies like that. But
love it. Cool. Great. Okay, Linda.
I'm Linda. I guess I spent 25 years in audit and compliance before I came over to the customers or the partner side of being involved with vendors and security. And it kind of, the theme of this webinar is appropriate. I don't know how many folks I talk to that are on the security side today whose background is in finance and accounting, because I guess for me, the way I got involved in it, I was doing the JD Edwards financial implementations and leading those projects. And I was dumb enough to care about the control environment, which meant I cared about what was going on in the security. Hence, I think I'm spent the last 10 years doing security. But it's fun. All Out is all about simplifying those security processes and managing your compliance, making it achievable, something that's part of daily business and not this project that sits on top of you once a year, and making sure that you're managing risk and everything's risk focused. So now I've gone from being responsible for the control environment for a Fortune 500 company to helping 500 customers manage their risk. And it's kind of fun working with ACO and so many of our other customers. So. And my guilty pleasure, I'm a rom-com girl, so I'd have to go Pretty Women, something like that. Is a toss-up between that and, Avengers kind of movies.
Oh, I've never seen an Avengers movie, but I do like Pretty Women. That's awesome. That's a good movie. Great. All right, Don, if you don't mind, quick intro.
Sure. I will. Yeah. So my name's Don Holman. I lead the solution consulting organization globally here at Medius. I've been in accounts payable automation and kind of digital vendor management, digital supply chain for coming up probably on 20 years. And let's think here. Guilty pleasure. Everyone's got to write this down if you haven't seen it. Edge of Tomorrow. It's a fantastic movie. Tom Cruise. It's an evolution of a cocky person with no skills to becoming a hardened battle savior of the world story. It's fantastic.
Wow.
I wrote it down.
I watch it every
Never heard
time.
of it.
I always get sucked when I see it. I just get sucked in. My boy and I both. So
that's awesome. All right, Andy, last but certainly not least, quick intro, please.
Hello, everyone. So Andy Chase, VP of Customer Success and Advisory at Circular Edge. I'm in my 9th year at CE. I've been in the JD Edwards space since 2008. and one. And my guilty pleasure, 3 movies came to mind really fast. It was boom, boom, boom. And they're all like 25-ish years old. Count of Monte Cristo, probably one of my favorites. Mask of Zorro, and Princess Bride.
Ooh, Princess Bride is, don't sleep, maybe that's a good one. Great. Yeah, I think Andy knows about 95% of the people on the call today. So Andy, very glad to have you on and have you join us. Just for the record, my guilty pleasure movie is You've Got Mail. We actually named our dog after Tom Hanks's dog in that movie. So great. I've seen that movie more than any other movie in my life. Cool. Well, let's get into it. I think I would like for us to start out chatting with Lucy a bit. Lucy, in your role as AP manager of ACO, I would imagine that AP is one of the riskier business processes that ACO deals with and manages on a regular basis, and that putting controls in place has been historically has taken a lot of hands on deck. So from your perspective, what do you see as the top 3 controls to have in place to effectively manage risk in AP?
Well, yeah, definitely. AP is right up there when it comes to risk, right? Because that's where the money goes out the door. And you know, we've really come, I think, a long way in terms of going from paper to being virtually paperless at this point. And I think definitely segregation of duties is a huge risk manager. I would also say having a good supplier onboarding process is at the top of my list. Maintaining a tight authorization matrix is as well, you know, is very, very important as well. You know, setting limits by person, by position, by category, and maintaining that authorization matrix. And of course, having a platform like Medius to automate that the enforcement of that process is also super important. And just my personal kind of pet peeve is also the payment instrument selection by vendor type and by vendor category is also very important to kind of minimize that risk.
Yeah, makes sense. So we're going to talk a lot about segregation of duties and authorization matrices, but those might be, I think segregation of duties is going to be, everyone will know generally what that means, but do you mind talking a little bit about what an authorization matrix is, and how you created that at ACO?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a pretty manual process, unfortunately, because that's something a little bit tough. You have to have very defined roles, and in a larger organization like ours, not every title has really the same role. So the important part for us, the way we do it is we're a construction company, so we have a lot of cost centers. Vast majority of our cost centers are jobs. So we have a separate authorization matrix that sets limits for project managers who run jobs. And, you know, in that area, it's generally kind of unlimited. Project managers run their jobs end to end. Nobody else really oversees that process except for profit and loss statements and, you know, profitability statements for jobs. But then we also have a list of business units or cost centers that are more departmental based. That is a list of our offices that we charge costs to and departments, separate departments that we charge costs to. And there we literally have multiple levels and layers of people that have authority over that specific department or business center or business unit with a certain dollar limit. And some are as complicated as specific GL codes. And Medius has really allowed us to automate that process with some business rules that we've built in that would allow the routing and the enforcement of that authorization matrix to the T. Because before, you know, AP had kind of this ability to say, oh, you know, it's $10 over, I'm just going to push it through, right? I'm not going to send it to an additional approver. Well, in Medius, it just automatically routes it to that next approver, even if it's $1 over that limit. So I really like that feature because it doesn't really leave a lot of room for error.
Yeah, takes the guesswork out of, you know, what should the human be actioning, and makes it a little more automated. Steve, some of the nouns that Lucy was using, levels and layers and complicated business rules, that takes IT collaboration to enable those in JD Edwards and AP automation platforms and all-out security in any tool and system that you're using. What are some of the ways that you and Lucy have found to collaborate with each other, make sure you're on the same page? And how have you helped her enable some of these processes and tables and layers and levels within the systems y'all are using?
Yeah, I mean, for us, a lot of it comes down to, establishing, configuring the system so that we can track the right approver for the right job. So on every job, we've got that person or those people. We've also got some setups that flow through to Medius for the back end of it. So on the AP side, who is responsible for what and that sort of thing? Who are those approvers? And all of that is, pretty well fed in from our job interface back up to Medius. But like Lucy said, there are some pieces of it that are still manual in terms of some of the escalations and rerouting and that sort of thing. And there's opportunity there, right? So we haven't really tapped into additional capabilities there yet, but when we're relatively new, we're 6 months or a little bit over 6 months, I think, on Medius. So there are more things like that we want to move forward with. Lucy and I collaborate like every day. We're talking constantly. So I think is a lot of that relationship really helps facilitate some of the changes, some of the interest areas, emphasis on on support or strategic design discussions. We meet once a week with her team. We meet once a week with the financial controller, not just on Medius, but just on all the things that are going on. And so we kind of talk through those discussions regularly, and we kind of a close, tight-knit partnership on all of that.
That's great. So to provide some context for how I kind of see this, the partnership between Medius and All Out and Circular Edge, with ACO sitting at the very center of that, as kind of a three-legged stool. So Steve, as you kind of think about how the three legs work together, can you talk about some of the work you've done with All Out and Circular Edge to make these processes easier to manage?
Sure. I'm going to take a little bit of a step back with the bigger picture of cyber, right? And we've got such an interest in cyber in general, as well as sort of financial fraud as a component of that. We've done a few things. One project that we recently, I guess we're sort of in the middle of it now. In our non-production environments, we've enabled single sign-on. We work with Circular Edge to do that. We've got our Active Directory hosted up in Azure, and so we're using JWT authentication now in our non-prod environments, and that's going really well. We're going to implement that in production before the end of our fiscal year, which is September. And so, that's one area. The idea there is, how do we make sure that people coming into JD Edwards don't have unauthorized access, right? So you could implement MFA, multi-factor authentication, in JD Edwards. We looked at the opportunities there. We ultimately decided we're already using MFA for Active Directory, so let's tap into that and just implement single sign-on through JWT authentication. Sorry if that's too much.
No, it's not.
So that works out really well from just a more global perspective. That's one of the areas that we worked with Circular Edge in particular. Also working with both Circular Edge and All Out. We've been using All Out for the last 4 years. We went live in July of 2020 on JD Edwards, and we leveraged All Out, and we have been leveraging All Out since that point in time. So with All Out, we're using some of the authorization implementation methods like super roles and functions like that. Some of the light reporting, we've tapped into some of the reporting, not all of it. We actually have a project on the docket right now to do more with that. So I've got discussions going with Linda and her team and Andy and his team right now around that. This one's a big one. So our steering committee is keenly interested in pursuing this in our audit committee as well. The idea here is, doing a better job with access controls and access reporting and sign-offs. So Circular Edge, I'm sure Andy will talk to this much better than I can, but has some tools in place available to automate that. All Out plays a part in all of that as well for reporting, for controls, SOD. We've implemented, like I said, parts of that, but we're just coming around again to a project to sort of really leverage what we have, the opportunities that we have in All Out, and with Circular Edge to automate all that stuff. So lots of stuff going on in our camp.
Yeah,
but it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, it's obvious that you're putting the framework in place, the controls in place, and then automating on top of that, which is really cool. That's how it becomes scalable and, kind of self-managed beyond. So Linda and Andy, to both of you, there's a lot of talk around segregation of duties and access management, and then how you layer on automation. Whichever one of you wants to jump in together, but talk about how
we actually have, before you guys go on, we've actually got a question just come in. I'm not sure. Hopefully, I was hoping Linda might see it, but I think it's only on my side. So Julie's joining us. Thanks for joining us today, Julie. And she's asked two questions. So she says, where did the JDE tolerance rules come into play with the controls you are using?
Okay, I can take that question, I guess, because I don't think anybody else is going to want to. At this point, the only JDE tolerances that we are using are related to POs. We have those set in both Medius and JDE, because if you don't have them exactly mirror each other, there's going to be errors, integration errors, basically. So they have to match. So we do definitely utilize very tight limits. We usually have a 5% not to exceed $100. So pretty low. We don't really go higher than that when it comes to POs, because we are trying to enforce POs on all purchases to the degree possible. And then I actually see the second question, if you guys would
amazing.
Like to take that as well.
Yeah, go ahead. Perfect.
And the next question was, do you use two-way match on expense POs, or are all POs three-way match? That's a great question. Being a construction company, it's difficult to do all three-way match because most of the materials are being delivered to job sites. So vast majority of our PO match is two-way match. We do utilize the three-way match on our inventory POs for our shops and tool cribs. And just kind of my 2 cents, that's a tough process. Medius makes it extremely easy. The tough part is making sure that the way you set up the items with the pricing and the unit of measures in JDE matches exactly how the vendor bills it. Because otherwise, no matter how well the automation is set up, it's just not going to match. So that's where we've been having struggles, is working with the vendors and working with our internal team to make sure the setup really matches how the vendors bill. But other than that, Medius is super helpful in terms of, those are the invoices that literally flow from capture all the way to the final approval step, meaning the integration, final integration approval step. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Awesome. Yeah, I think obviously you're taking advantage of automation to automate the invoices that should post very, very easily, so that you can then focus on those suppliers that are billing you in the wrong units of measure, and changing their units of measure on you. So good answer for sure. Cool. All right.
So you want me to jump in with the kind of the process? So
Linda,
I know.
Linda, can I volley one over? Because to answer, Steve just touched on, was one of the scenarios we were in was a customer had to do their recertification process and their annual user reviews, and it was a manual process, getting something like 500 people to print out a piece of paper and sign it, and just chasing down those people to do that was difficult. And so one of the projects we worked on with All Out was related to taking DocuSign and the power of e-signatures. And we used Atom IQ on our side for some of the workflows. And we tied it in with All Out to automate what was this very extravagant manual process that took weeks and weeks and weeks into something that could be very manageable, giving back a lot of time to people. So Linda, Is that good? Do you want to start
It
there?
is. No, it's
Okay.
fine. And really that's kind of the end result of the process. When you're really looking at that access management and some of the things that Lucy's talking about getting the right people involved, it really starts at user provisioning. So how are you making sure when you're giving people access, they're getting the right access so that they don't have process disruption and they don't have wasted time and they don't have things that they shouldn't. So you start there, you look at, regular reviews of, do the right people have the right access? Because just because they needed it 3 years ago doesn't mean they need it today. And so you want to look at both user access reviews, cleaning up some of those folks that maybe have changed jobs but nobody told you, and then you lead into that segregation of duties and critical access. Is it appropriate that 8 people can manage banking information? Well, maybe not. So it's all about focusing on risk. You don't want to manage everything. You want to manage what is most important to your organization. So do you care if somebody can do purchase order inquiry? Probably not, but you do care who can update your bank account information, who can see protected information, who can enter a voucher on behalf of your organization, create a vendor. So kind of paying attention to where the risk is and then leading into that, regular reviews of critical access. I know Steve and I were talking a little bit about that. How do we make sure that now that we're 6 months post go live, how do I look at the employees that aren't signing into the system or aren't using the processes? Can I manage those inactive users? Because when you look at cybersecurity and some of the people that might be accessing your system that shouldn't be, those inactive user IDs that might have risky access really offer them opportunities to reset a password and sign on and perform transactions on behalf of your organization. So there's a lot of different steps in play, and really what we're seeing, well, I know what Steve had been talking to me about and what other organizations are doing. It's all about moving some of those steps online, simplifying it. You want to spend more time managing risk and less time just generating the information. So those are some of the trends that we're seeing. um, how to automate not only your accounts payable processes or your fixed asset processes or your other financial processes, but also how do you automate those review processes and granting access, things like, request and approval all within the system. Instead of somebody calling you and saying, give somebody access, get online, have them enter the request right within JD Edwards, and all you're doing is reviewing and approving it. You can even automate those segregation of duties validations ahead of time, or you can do things like making sure, I don't want anybody to have vendor setup without Treasury signing off on it. So you can do those preventative steps as well. So there's a lot that we're seeing going on to try to manage this and make it easier but safer.
Yeah. It's good stuff. And these are all concepts. When I was in finance, I had no concept of access control, who had the right to do what. I worked for a private, relatively small, $100 million company. And we weren't thinking about those kinds of things. Didn't have to. We weren't held to Sarbanes-Oxley. We didn't have to enact SOX.
That's probably the biggest thing. A lot of people say we're not SOX, we don't have to. It's a foundation of a good control environment.
Exactly.
It's just a basic, managing risk, both protecting your organization and protecting the employees. We've all gone down paths where life can get tough for your employees, for any of us. So if there's not opportunity for them to do fraudulent transactions, they don't feel the burden of making a choice. Protect your employees too.
Yeah. Great. Well, good background, Linda. Don, I'd like you to kind of weigh in here. You've been in this industry for a long time, have seen very, very complicated business rules enacted in your time at SAP and at JP Morgan. And now at Medius, you're really helping us push the envelope on how we use AI to take automation even further in mitigating risk and really preventing fraud. We start with preventing fraud, because if you set that as the foundation of technology, you're going to be able to do anything and everything else that you need to do from a mitigation standpoint. So why don't you chime in and give us some examples that you're seeing of how this all comes together in an AP environment?
Yeah, sure. And I think I'll start with, interestingly, the research study that we just conducted of over 2,000 finance professionals. One of the data points, I think you mentioned this, Jameson, up front, that despite all the things we're talking about, 57% of financial professionals can still independently make a financial transaction without any additional approval layers, which is pretty fascinating. But I'm not actually surprised because
No.
is someone, and I'm going to go a little bit sideways here, but
Okay.
in the world of solution consulting, my team works in an environment where we're responsible for demonstrating all aspects of software. So inherently, we grant ourselves access with super user privileges. And it's not surprising when you think about an organization, oh, this person is super trusted. Let's just give them czar-like access to do things within an environment. So I'm not actually surprised these little gaps exist. And it's probably all done under the guise of trust. But anyway, the gaps are there and they are real, and I think they're real risks. But I think the bigger question is, it's 2024 and the computing power available to fraudulent actors is massive. You talked about deep fakes, and deep fakes is essentially real-time voice replication to essentially steal someone's identity in real time to fake out a person into doing something that they wouldn't normally otherwise do. When you couple that with like a multi-threaded concept of, a fake invoice to a real looking vendor, and the urgency to get this paid, coupled with, potential gaps in the financial control process, the threats are extremely real and the data is all over the place. These attempts happen. Facebook, Google, a bunch of organizations have fallen victim to millions of dollars. So that's number one. But I think from a media's perspective, one of the things that we're doing is some innovations to, pattern detection on inherently risky transactions. And so, the basic level is, hey, this thing is out of normal, either from a time and date stamp or an amount stamp, or from a first-time vendor or a spoofing vendor. The email address is different. Those are some examples. And a basic example is, even, you brought it up front, Jameson, an expense-based transaction that could also be an invoice. Maybe it was paid already on an expense based on a P card, but the supplier sent in an invoice. That's not necessarily an attempt at fraud, but it's a risk. So all of these things an environment needs to safeguard and protect against. And I would say the last thing, going almost full circle on the movie example, I almost brought up The Matrix, but it was too dark. But there's a quote that Morpheus makes in The Matrix. It's like, it's based on rules, and rules can be broken. And one of the things we've introduced at Medius is part of one of our fraud and risk detection innovations is the concept of a randomized approval, where essentially a random person from a pool of potential candidates can be inserted into the workflow for a potentially fraudulent or risky transaction as a safeguard against maybe an internal threat, which is, I think, a pretty innovative idea as an additional layer of protection. Sorry, that was long-winded, but that was
No, it's good. Yeah, that last one is key to preventing collusion, especially in AP. As much as you want to trust employees and managers, collusion is a significant risk. I think it's the top risk, because it gets at human psychology. And so this randomized approval is meant to combat that. Well, let's do a poll.
I was going to say in my audit background, that was the one that, we always said that's the one you can't find, is the collusion.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't want to leave it to chance, just in case you do find it. Yeah.
No.
So I'll say we're going to go to a poll. When we were prepping for this session, our number one benchmark for a successful webinar is, one, everybody on the panel gets something out of it, that it's valuable for all of us and for all of you. But two is interaction. So it's great to have the questions. We got a ton of questions before the session, but seriously, we get our heart flutters with joy when we see a question pop into the Q&A. So if you've got a question or a thought or something to add, put it in there. Steph, I hope I'm not the one controlling the poll because I have no idea how to do it, but let's go to the first poll. Perfect. Okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most confident, how confident are you that your own AP organization is effectively managing AP access, workflows, and approvals to prevent fraud attempts? So 1 is not confident, 10 is very confident. I also hope I'm not the one in charge of closing the poll because I don't know how to do that either.
Steph is amazing at having our back.
I've got it. I've got it. Just let's give it another. Good. We're nearly there. 72% have participated.
Oh,
we're
great.
going up nearly 80%. Here we go. Let's hit that 80 mark, people. We're at 77%. If you've not participated, please hit the poll now. 79%. One more and then we'll close it. If you're out there, one more person, please take our poll.
They won't let us answer. They won't let us answer.
Okay, ending the poll. Ready to share the results. Here we go. So the results should be in front of you now.
Great. Not a lot of very confident people, but some somewhat confidence, a lot of middle of the road. So I'm not surprised to hear that, and we'll get at that in this next section of the conversation. You know, we've alluded to SOX and Sarbanes-Oxley, and if you're publicly traded, the rules are kind of laid out for you, and all you got to do is put them in place. Not that that's that easy either, but at least you got a rule book that you can follow. But if you're not publicly traded, it's difficult. So Lucy and Steve, kind of a tag team, if you don't mind. ACCO's not public, but you both worked for public companies in the past, and you try to operate at the highest level of control possible by following SOX, even though you don't have to. What are some tips you'd both recommend for companies who are just getting started in deploying more robust internal controls?
I'll throw in the first thing that I would say is, in my experience, auditors are your friends, not your enemies. So as long as you have that perspective, I think you're moving in the right direction. The rules are there to keep you out of trouble, right? And so here we are at ACCO, where we're an employee-owned organization, and yeah, I'm not implementing controls to protect shareholder value. Well, I am, but I am the shareholder, so I'm protecting my fellow employees, really. And so, you know, to me, it's no different at ACCO. In fact, maybe more important at ACCO, as much or more, to implement good controls and have all that reporting in place so that I can assuredly go to an audit board or to our CFO and say, hey, I'm confident we have adequate controls. We have adequate segregation of duties, and the risk of fraud is minimized. You know, that to me is really important to be able to say.
Great. Lucy, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think definitely important to have a good supplier onboarding process in place. Like, for example, when we have a very stringent process in terms of, we get an invoice from an unknown supplier. No one just goes in and sets up that supplier. That invoice goes through validation process until we find out that someone actually engaged the supplier and placed an order. There is no onboarding process that is being triggered. So I think that's super important, because that way no new unknown suppliers get paid fraudulently. Definitely having multiple duplicate invoice checks is great. Like, implementing media is really added that layer of, and especially now that we're on the fraud and risk module as well, we get to see the duplicates across all companies, all divisions, because we have several right off the bat. We get to delete those invoices before they even hit workflow, which is huge. You know, and even if they, you know, an invoice doesn't get caught there, then, you know, and Medius also suggests some similar looking invoice, you know, threats kind of in the system as well, which allows us to check it. And on top of that, we have a duplicate check in JDE, and that was made possible by the integration that Circular Edge built for us, is we also get a warning message if an invoice was manually entered in JDE and then also fed in from Medius. So to me, that kind of makes us feel pretty confident that we've got at least a duplicate invoice issue under control. Of course, it's not foolproof because, you know, vendors unfortunately reuse invoice numbers or rebill an invoice, same invoice with a different invoice number sometimes. So those are a little bit harder to catch. But I think having a AP automation and having that transparency and enforcing POs, I think all together really work well because that allows you to even catch those duplicate invoices.
I was going to say, Lucy, doesn't the automation then free up your time to be able to look for those more harder to catch things?
Besides that, besides the automation allows you to do reporting, which I think is key, right? Is the reporting is what we've been missing in our old system, where there really wasn't this all kind of like you know, big picture view of things that are happening. There's no way to run reports, compare notes, you know, sort by invoice number, invoice amount, vendor name, you know, kind of like just do all kinds of different things. But you know, very, very good point, right? Automation frees you up for you to be able to run those reports and analyze and see trends in certain places where you would have missed them otherwise. You know, I could talk forever, but I think some other things are, you know, having a good, like, I know a lot of customers rely on ACH heavily. We're actually very much against, not against ACH, don't get me wrong, but we're very mindful in awarding ACH as a payment method to vendors because we find that riskier, harder to manage, and having to deal with PII, and you know, it's just a lot of maintenance, and to me, it's costlier for the company. So what we found very successful is having a really good virtual credit card payment program. That actually works really well because it's much more risk averse, and you know, you're able to dispute credit card payments, and the way the credit cards are issued are for a single like bill. There's restrictions on the card, and you can actually restrict those as well. And then I would also say positive pay. Positive pay is a huge help when it comes to risk management. ACH filters, in addition to positive pay, are also very, very important. That way, no dollar goes out the door that you haven't previously authorized, basically. And maybe maintaining the supplier changes. So making sure you know who has access to make changes to the suppliers, super important. Limiting the number of people who have access and having a streamlined program where any banking instruction changes are voice verified with a known contact, not a video that comes through, not a, you know, not a communication that's directed from the supplier, but more like initiated by you using your own known contact. So, you know, that's what we've been utilizing. And when suppliers come in asking for remittance information change, we generally drive them to log into our supplier portal themselves and update their information as much as possible to the degree possible.
That's awesome, Lucy. Lots of really good stuff. I think in my past, well, you talked about reporting. Reporting is so key. That's how I found the mileage trend. Like, okay, our mileage is trending every single week. This guy's submitting so many miles. Something's going on here. But for companies where, like, it might feel insurmountable to some people on the line right now, just getting started in this process. And I'm very sensitive to that because I've been in those shoes before. There's a organization out there called the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, and they're kind of the industry for fraud examination. And we have a guy on our product team who's actually certified as a certified fraud examiner. But that you can go become a certified fraud examiner on your own. You don't have to have a CPA to do it. It's a great thing that I've seen people do just to get up to speed, especially if they work for a company that isn't publicly traded, get up to speed on how can fraud occur? What are all the things we need to think through? Wire fraud, ACH fraud, check tampering, invoice fraud.
And they go well beyond accounts payable. I mean, it's so all of those other touch points across your financial processes as well. And, you know, what, like Lucy said, controlling who has security to particular applications or particular processes broader than, yes, in accounts payable, but in those other financial areas as well. The ACFE touches those as well and gives you best practice information.
Exactly. So great organization to tap into. Great one. I would love to become a certified fraud examiner someday. So maybe that would be a useful track for some folks to go down. And again, we've got a guy in product who does it. So it's applicable and relevant for you, whether you're in finance or IT. Andy, my belief and exposure to you in the last 2 years, which has been amazing, getting to know you better and getting to know Circular Edge better. But I feel like you have a better grasp of the JDE landscape than anybody on the planet. So can you kind of shed some light on, knowing that 99% of the folks online are JDE customers, what do you see as low-hanging fruit as they begin to explore more thoughts and ideas around internal controls?
Yeah, I'm going to speak from a very small or narrow view and let Linda do her thing, let Dawn and the media's team do their thing, and let the customers do what they do best. But for me, I like to tie things back to the people that are involved. And some of this is just so simple. It comes down to just trying to keep up with the things that we've been doing for so long in a certain way. I had given this panelist team an example of a report I do on a monthly basis. It takes hours and hours and hours, and I've tried to offload that to other people, but I'm the one who's done it thousands of times, literally thousands of times, check, 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 check. So my eyes know what to see, but that can't scale past me. And I think we all want some sort of automation. We want the confidence that things are being done with technology and that our processes are improved, where the people can trust what's been implemented. And what I'm seeing in the JD Edwards space is a lot of pain around the amount of work that needs to be done and the size of teams that are available. One customer shared some data just very recently and said they now have a process in place to prioritize all the requests so that they can not do a lot of the requested activities, because the ones that are more important have to get done. So they're literally saying, hey, there's a lot of security stuff happening and we can't get to it all. We can only do what we can do. And so I think this topic is very important. I know we haven't covered like 90% of the things that we hope to cover in this hour. So I'm going to throw
okay.
a suggestion for everyone that this might be a series where we could do this maybe 2 or 3 times just to cover some of the other topics. But that's my take.
Great.
Yeah, I would agree. There were a ton of great questions that came in ahead of time. And when you start looking at the controls and managing the processes, the more time you can spend on focusing on what is at risk. So really target your efforts into where you're adding value, and where you can manage things more effectively. If you try to do everything, and I tell this to all of our customers, if you try to take on everything at once, you're set up for failure. It's any ERP system, any ERP project. You dive into everything, you're set up for failure. But target those things that are most important and can offer the most value for your organization. I know Jameson had asked a little bit about audits at one point, and a lot of times you can use, we do quick 4-hour audits for some organizations. Just here's the high level risk that where you can find opportunities. What are some of the best practice recommendations? I know Circular Edge does some of that where they do more robust audits. So just using those opportunities to step in quickly into the space and get quick value.
Yeah, Linda, for companies that don't have an internal audit teams, Steve talked about Audit being your friend. So for companies that don't have internal audit teams or aren't really parlaying the external audit relationship into something more useful, who do you see at organizations responsible for auditing SOD and SOX compliance and that kind of thing? What role is typically responsible for that?
Normally it comes out of either a program management group or like somebody who's over your ERP processes, or a lot of times it's got to partner with your finance side, both your finance and your business ownership. So IT cannot manage access in a vacuum because they don't know who should be doing what. They don't know, as much as they are experts within your business processes, they're not the ones doing it every day. So it really does involve a partnership between somebody who knows where the risk is and somebody who knows what it takes to get it done.
Have you seen internal audit play a part?
Always. They can,
Right.
a lot of times they're either defining, these are the 6 critical processes we care about. These are our most important SOD. We deliver a best practice. Here's what the industry says are critical processes and segregation of duties. And I always recommend somebody in your internal audit group looking at it and saying, this is what makes sense for us, or these are the ones we want to target first. And the internal audit and your executive management often play into that.
Right. Yeah, I think the best practices are key. We do a lot of implementation projects in Medius, and folks
Yeah.
will come to us without any segregation of duties or authorization matrices that they built. They've never built them. And they ask us to help them design that.
Why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah.
Why reinvent the wheel? We've spent years and years on this stuff, so let us help.
Great. Well, 4 minutes left. Let's do a poll. We've got another poll, and we'll get that. And then if there's time, we'll do rapid fire final questions. Steph, if you can pull it up.
2
seconds. Okay, it's not.
We're coming now. Here we go.
Okay.
Okay, launching poll 2. There you go.
Okay, so the question is, do you leverage any third-party partnerships for AP automation, for security and risk reporting, or for JD Edwards consulting expertise? Trying to get a feel for what you manage just straight within your own team and within JD Edwards, and what you've reached outside of those, those calls to partner with other organizations. You can select multiple.
Okay, we'll give it another 1 second there, guys. Anyone else would like to join that poll? Okay. Ending poll and sharing results.
So 50% use third party for AP automation, 26% use third party for security and risk, 55 for JDE consulting expertise. JDE must be pretty complicated. That's a lot of external consulting expertise. That's awesome. And then only 24% manage all of this internally through JD Edwards. Awesome. Well, with 2 minutes left, we don't have time for much, but I will ask this. Everybody has access to reporting either through JD Edwards, through All Out, or through Medius. So let's go around the horn quickly and just say your favorite report that you're running out of your relevant system. Andy, you go first. What's your favorite JD Edwards report?
I don't run JD Edwards reports. I just help the people.
Boom. Perfect. All right, Lucy, what's your favorite report?
I don't think I have favorite reports in JD
None?
Edwards.
No, what about a bottleneck report out of Medius?
Yeah, those are great. We haven't been fully utilizing those yet. We're actually working with our analytics now to create more meaningful ones, because we have too many users in the system.
Yeah.
So it's bottlenecks could be difficult, but I really like the fact that we can run literally a full accrual detail, or just a report that shows every single invoice by cost center. To me, that's like one of the most useful reports, because that cuts down the time on doing an accrual at the end of the month to like almost nothing.
Nice. Steve, what about you? All Out or JD Edwards report? What's your favorite? What's your go-to?
Yeah, mine are going to be, there's probably 2 of them, but All Out and JD Edwards reports that show me access, ability. So the people that have access to what, that comes out of All Out, all the individuals. And then the one that I look at more regularly is everybody that's provisioned across the board, so that I can, like, and those who have not logged in recent weeks, months, so I can decommission people that have slipped through.
Decommission report. Love it. Awesome. Well, thanks, everyone. Really appreciate the time. Hopefully this can become a series. I think that was a great idea, Andy. And hopefully this was useful to everybody on the line. I enjoyed working with the team prepping. So have a great rest of the day.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.